Welcome to this official launch of EuroGEOSS. I don't dare invite you to get seated because I sense there are couple of seats still there. So if someone feels more comfortable like that, still possible. But I really would like to welcome everybody. It's always impressive to have a packed room like that. We will keep the door open to have fresh air and fresh flow. But we will try to keep the thing as cool as possible. Now, it is my pleasure really to introduce to you today some very distinguished speakers who will present this EuroGEOSS. And in particular, we will have an address from the Director General of DG Research and Innovation from the European Commission, who turns out also to be the ExCom lead co-chair. So I think you see the point there, Robert Jan Smits. Robert Jan will introduce the session. Then I will present a few slides to describe the concepts. Andrea Weisbach, our colleague from DG GROW in the European Commission, will complement, in particular, presenting what Copernicus is bringing to the EuroGEOSS initiative. And then also, very interestingly, we will have a set of concrete examples of what EuroGEOSS can mean. And this will be, I guess, very tangible examples of the added value of EuroGEOSS. So, this said, because we're a little bit late already, I would like to go straight to the introduction and invite Robert Jan to tell us a few things about EuroGEOSS. Please.
Thank you very much, Jack, and I suppose this microphone is working. Well, welcome to all of you for the launch event here of EuroGEOSS. And it's great, as Jack already mentioned, to see that so many of you are here today, here in Washington at the Ronald Reagan Conference Center. As you all know, Europe has been a major player in GEO since its start, and we have invested substantial funds to support GEO, but also the development and implementation of GEOSS, the system of systems. We have invested in a generation of data, in the curation of data, in making these data interoperable. But now the time has come to harvest on our investments and to move from a data-centric approach to a user-centric approach. And that's why today we are launching EuroGEOSS. EuroGEOSS will be a platform to identify, to showcase, to incubate and scale up user-driven applications of Earth observation data. And Copernicus, which you all know quite well, will be at the core of EuroGEOSS, and I'm extremely grateful that Andreas Weisbach is with us here today, and he will say a few words about this integration. But I'm also very happy that Max, Thierry and Pierre are with us today to also talk about user-driven application of data generated by different applications in different fields. So without further ado, I think it's time, Jack, that you are taking us through EuroGEOSS, and I all wish that we can work in a collegial way as we've been doing up to now, because this is something which will change Europe's way of dealing and using with data which have been generated and will be generated in the future by GEOSS. Thank you very much.
So, thank you very much, Robert Jan. And I think here we have many representatives from the high-level working group. So we are all jet-lagged. You all know the feeling. But you will see it's really a very exciting thing, EuroGEOSS. We are very proud of it, so it will keep us awoken. Now, the concept. I will present a couple of slides which will show the aim and the key features of this system. The objectives are pretty straightforward. There are two, really. One is to increase the benefits for Europe of its participation within GEOSS, so we can really, reap some benefits from being part of this venture. But we have also the responsibility for contributing to GEOSS and building it. And as a matter of fact, we are one of the main contributors, so I think we should not be shy about it. One very important thing for us, it is application-oriented. And we're not starting from scratch, of course. We have in the Commission with DG RTD and DG GROW, we have two partners who have been working for years and years already, I would say even 15 years at least, on this particular topic. And we have always been working hand in hand, and more than ever, and we see the benefits we draw from that. We have so-called umbrella agreements. It's something about communication, cooperation, coordination. Coordination means we're avoiding building silos. Coordination, cooperation means having a critical mass and, having something which is stronger. Now, very important, and Robert Jan mentioned it, for, I think, a good decade, we have been collecting data, and really quite a lot. And we're living in the age of big data, and Geo, Copernicus, some other systems are really, really big in that respect. Enormous volumes, exa, tera, petabytes, you name it. It's all great, but still, what do we do with this data? So the point, when you think about it, the point is really to shift this paradigm, the raw material being data, to transform it into information, and an information which is valuable for the user. And this is where the spin is different nowadays. It's really user-centric. And this is absolutely essential to our initiative. Next slide shows that, the focus. Clearly, very clearly, sustainable development goals, and this is something which is dear to GEO and its strategy, so we align very well in that respect with EuroGEOSS. We have the societal benefits, but we see things also from a European angle, and which may be different how you see it. If you were in Asia or in Africa, maybe you see things a bit different. We try, of course, to privilege the European view and context. As I said, we're not starting from scratch. Horizon 2020, the current framework program for research and innovation, is, of course, instrumental, and I will say a few more words on that later. But we have, of course, Copernicus, which is a multi-billion initiative, a very, very important investment made in the EU. We have, of course, also the work which is carried out at ESA, and ESA has been our partner from day one on these things. We have national initiative, so we have a wealth of initiative, of elements, ingredients, I would say, in Europe, and the time has come to really assemble that, to streamline, to align, in order to get maximum added value and synergies. Now, as I said already, the importance of getting the user to draw on these assets, to make the link between the volumes of data, the services which are being shaped, and at the end of the chain, what the users really need. And users may be many of different kind. Think of politicians, decision makers, think of municipalities, think of farmers in their field, whatever. Now, another thing which is very important for us is also to make very visible to the rest of the world that with EuroGEOSS, we have a vibrant industry, vibrant research innovation community, who are building up something extremely valuable, which we would like to, to share, to contribute with Geo proper, but also it's, let's face it, it's a fantastic platform to show our know-how in this field. The next slide shows how we are locating, positioning ourselves on a map, on a world map. As you know, Geo has taken an approach where we work by continents, by regions. Because as I said, you may have different degrees of maturity, different kinds of assets, different kinds of problems also. And we saw along the years a certain structuring effect. We know about EuroGEOSS, AfriGEOSS, AsiaGEOSS, Asia and Oceania, I must say. And to some extent, whilst as we are one of the main contributors to GEO, we were not as structured. So we felt the time had come to make something happen in that respect. And I believe this is well appreciated by our partners. Added value. So here you see EuroGEOSS being an incubator. And this is done in cooperation with Copernicus. And this is a way to produce new added value services from these large volumes of data, combining different sources in space, in situ, airborne, different kinds, and to test these Earth observation services and applications. And, you know, there is no limit really on the variety of applications we can think of. It's a matter of creativity or responding to needs and identifying these needs. So, global data sets, yes, we have that. GEOS will cater for that. We were having a discussion before this meeting with the colleagues from the high-level working group and saying that providing services was very, very good, but it was probably not enough in order to fulfill the expectation and the needs of the end users. So we know we have to work on that dimension as well. And this is why you see this bullet on promoting, scaling up, developing Earth observation applications in association with users. Because if by design you have the users on board, then you stand a serious chance to get them to use these applications, which creates a virtuous circle, because de facto you create a certain market. Now, something which is very important also, and that's more for the policy makers, is the forecasting capabilities for sound decision making. We were discussing with our colleagues from NOAA a few hours ago, and it's pretty clear that natural crises, natural events like the hurricanes, forest fires, things of that kind, call for all the possible means to possibly even prevent, at least detect early, and help and guide those who are intervening to try to rescue people, to limit damages and catastrophes. And by and large, we know by experience in the European Commission, we have a number of policies, be it in climate change, be it in environment policy, a number of things like that, or even when we look at migration, where Earth observation application can be extremely useful in forming what I would call a qualified view, a sound view based on evidence and not, on impressions or wrong interpretations. So this is quite important, and in the Commission we are very, very eager to have these services at our disposal. And this is one of the reasons why we are investing in these systems. But I want to stress again and again that Andrea is here to remind us, if I had forgotten, that we are not, overlapping or duplicating or replicating Copernicus. Not at all. On the contrary, we're really in the domain of coordination and synergy there. But Andrea will demonstrate very well the beauty of working together. Now, the resources, because at the end of the day, you have to invest something in such an initiative. And of course, we have Copernicus, ESA, and the rest, but still there is some extra mile to cover to get off the ground, so to say. Our main instrument for EuroGEOSS, which we're using, is called Horizon 2020, which is our framework program for research and innovation. And in particular, in the work program 2018-2020, which will be officially announced Friday this week. We have a topic under the Societal Challenge 5 called Climate Action, Environment, Resource Efficiency, where for the year 2018 we will have a topic dedicated to this furthering of EuroGEOSS, providing the necessary resource to shape it up, and it will be amounting to about 15 million euros. Of course, Copernicus will be there as well, and by and large, you will see that there will be some other Horizon 2020 projects contributing to the EuroGEOSS, especially in the field of applications. Think, we mentioned here a few examples in the field of agriculture. So, as you know, agriculture is evolving. Technology may introduce a number of changes in this field. Think of precision agriculture, for example. Renewable energies, if you want to have a good atlas of solar, exposition, that's certainly something where EuroGEOSS can contribute. Protected areas, and we know of many such sensitive areas, be it on the coastal regions, be it in cities, with floods exposure, for example. Citizen observatories, many. And then we have this GEOSS common infrastructure, which we will be supporting, which will be the platform, the resource we will use to fund this application. Because it will be a common foundation, we believe this will be a way to ease certain formats, certain standardization, and ease the transfer of data in different domains. A little word on how this will operate in terms of governance and communication. Well, the high-level working groups, this so-called European caucus, will be really in the lead and has already worked a lot on that. We have had numerous discussions. There will be a coordination group, and we're volunteering as Commission to chair this group. And of course, all the European countries will be represented, as well as a number of participating organizations who are instrumental in the process. And we will have, we believe, some dedicated special working groups for each applications, most likely. This is still work in progress, but we have already a pretty good idea on where we want to go. Now, a little bit of communication. We have websites. We have also some leaflets and infographics to make a little bit of publicity, because it's very good to have EuroGEOSS, but we need also to communicate about EuroGEOSS. And I would like to invite all of you present in this room or listening to the web streaming to look at the documentation, but also to express your views about it. This is always welcome, definitely. The implementation, well, as I said, work in progress, but we will present now to you in a few minutes some examples. It would be good to engage in a little discussion on how you perceive this process. We have picked, in a slightly arbitrary fashion, 3 samples: agriculture, renewable energies, protected area. But there could be many others. We have to find out how to prioritize the selection of this application. And this will come along the years. So I will stop here. You have here the reference to the website. And again, very many thanks for standing in this room, which I know is getting a bit warm this afternoon. But it's a pleasure to be with you today, and again, very proud that we have reached this moment where we can launch together something, and this is called EuroGEOSS. Thank you. Now, that was the easy part, but here comes Andrea, and Andrea is really the expert of Copernicus. He's Mr. Copernicus. And I must say it's always a pleasure to work with him and his colleagues, his team. They're doing a really great job. We wouldn't be there today without his work. Andrea, please.
So thank you very much for your kind words, Jacques. Also, a very warm welcome from me.
Not too warm.
Exactly. I was going to apologize in advance. I hope you don't mind if I take off my jacket because it's getting to a point where it is quite hot. It's okay. It can. So, thank you very much. Robert-Jan, to colleagues in DG RTD, I can only underline what you have just said. I think that the cooperation between our DGs in the area of Earth observation has been fantastic, and I'm hoping that this presentation will allow me to demonstrate how EuroGEOSS and Copernicus can work together side by side, implementing this user-driven approach, which I think is at the core of both initiatives. So a small reminder, what is Copernicus? I don't think that I need to say too much about this. It is the flagship program of the European Union, which has quite a significant budget of 4.3 billion euros between 2014 and 2020. It is an environmental and security-related program, so at its core mission is the monitoring of the Earth, its environment and ecosystem, which is the environmental pillar, and then preparation for crisis security risks and different types of disasters as the security pillar. The program, in addition to the satellites, which forms the space component, has 6 specific services, so land, marine, atmosphere, climate change, security, and emergency, which are looking to process the data which comes from the satellites to a higher level and really focus on the application areas. I will very soon come to the link between that and EuroGEOSS, which I believe to be fundamental in this case. Collecting high volumes of data, so Copernicus with the 3 Sentinel families of Sentinel 1, 2, and 3, when all are fully operational, will generate more than 10 petabytes of data every year. That is a major challenge for us, to say the least, and the second complementarity between the 2 initiatives is related to data, which I will also touch upon a little bit later. The program from the very start has been user-driven. We are not only designing this program on the basis of user needs, but as we're now entering the process of preparing for Copernicus 2.0, which is the future of the Copernicus program from 2020 onwards, we have engaged in an enormous user requirements gathering exercise, which I think will actually serve both us and EuroGEOSS, because EuroGEOSS would obviously be able to leverage and draw upon all the expertise from the users that we have gathered in the process. I'm already seeing the first typo in this presentation in the next line. One of the objectives of Copernicus is to contribute to EU's global role and Europe's contribution to not OGEO but 2GEO, which is actually enshrined in the Copernicus regulation. The Copernicus regulation states very clearly that the Copernicus program is Europe's contribution to GEO. And once again, EuroGEOSS is in a way an exemplification of that, simply because by building on Copernicus data and information and by bringing in other assets, it will help us strengthen the role of Copernicus in the global context, particularly multilaterally through an initiative like EuroGEOSS. We have a free, full and open data policy, which I can assure you when we were setting up the program was subject to a large debate between the different stakeholders. But what we have seen is that this free, full and open data policy, with a few exceptions in the security domain, has proven to be extremely beneficial. Even from if we take just the European Space Agency's Open Hub, we see that the initial number of planned users is exceeding more than tenfold what we were planning for at the start of the program. You can imagine the pressure that this puts on our data distribution and data access infrastructures, simply to scale them up to the user need. And finally, increasingly, and I will also touch upon this later, it is a tool for economic development and a driver for digital economy. As you can imagine, these petabytes of data are proving what today is popularly called the big data challenge. But here I would underline maybe one thing, which is that Copernicus data in terms of driving the digital economy is quite important. When you're reflecting upon the role of big data and the constraints upon it, then usually the constraints are related to data ownership, to security, and to privacy. The data which comes from the sentinels of Copernicus doesn't suffer from any of these drawbacks, I should say, simply because the resolutions that we have designed for the sentinels are sufficiently low for them not to pose privacy or security issues, and on the proprietary side, the data is by definition free, full and open. So we make it available under an open license to everybody. This I will skip through very quickly because that's the basic design of the program. It combines data from sentinels which are owned by the EU, and you see on the left-hand side, from a series of contributing missions which are national missions, private sector missions and international missions, and in situ data into a data management system which delivers value-added products. So the idea is that we have the data acquisition part based on 3 pillars of the sentinels, the contributing missions and in situ, which is then made available to the service component, which in turn comes up with value-added products. These services, or the value-added products, I should say, are split into 6. As I have mentioned already, here is a graphical representation. They concern, it's like an old fairy tale of looking at the land, the air, the sea, but also climate change, emergency, and security. Now, having briefly introduced the program, I should put it into the context of the space strategy which the European Commission adopted about a year ago, back in October 2016. There are 4 priorities there, but 3 of them are of particular importance today. The first one relates to user uptake of space data and services. In short, we call that return on investment. What our constituents are quite rightly asking us is that having made a significant investment in the space programs, be that Copernicus but also Galileo, what is the return on investment in terms of the socio-economic benefits? And this immediately creates the link with EuroGEOSS, which I see, and as Robert Jan and I think Jacques made it entirely clear at the start, is really a user-driven exercise which should help both Copernicus data but also other data sets to be made available in Europe and internationally. The second objective is the fostering of the competitiveness of the European space sector and new business opportunities. This obviously relates to, in the context of GEO, on the ongoing debates on the involvement of the commercial sector. But what we also see is that fighting global challenges through EuroGEOSS or Copernicus should actually open doors to our private industry to be able to exploit the data for value-added products. And finally, by definition, Earth observation addresses challenges, and we only need to look at geo-priority areas for this, which are global in nature. So we have seen the activation of the Copernicus Emergency Service recently for hurricanes in the United States. We see it being used for forest fires in Spain and Italy. We see it being used for floodings and other types of natural disasters, not to mention climate change, which is a common problem to all of us. So before moving on to this slide, I will really focus on 2 things in particular today. One, how Copernicus and EuroGEOSS interact with each other in terms of managing the big data challenge and building what I call the European ecosystem for Earth observation data. And the second pillar will be dealing with the links between the Copernicus services and how those can be picked up by EuroGEOSS to be made available and refined to a higher level by different users. So this I mentioned already. The amounts of data that we're having to deal with are unprecedentedly large. The challenge that we're seeing in Europe are very similar to the ones that you described, Jacques, under EuroGEOSS, is that we have many different types of dissemination infrastructures, and when users want to make use of Earth observation data sets, they have to go to 6 or 7 locations separately to download the data to their premises, pre-process it, and only then can they start adding value to it. When we speak to researchers and companies, they say that up to 65 to 70% of their time and effort goes into finding the data and rendering it ready for analysis and value-added activities. So what we need to try to do is carry that burden for them so that more time and more resources can be devoted to the production of the value-added products themselves. New technology developments are obviously no secret to anybody here. These relate to the improvement of processing capabilities and cloud computing in particular, which allow us to do much more with much greater amounts of data in a much shorter period of time. What we also see is that there is a great deal of need for Earth observation data to be cross-fertilized, both with the ICT sector in terms of data processing, but also with non-EO data sets. I think that the real value of Earth observation data will not be confined to it being processed alone. Combining it with other data sets, socioeconomic, statistical, health-related, is where we will really see the value of Earth observation data unleashed. And what concerns Copernicus, at least, for us it makes very little difference whether products are 100% based on Copernicus, 70% based on Copernicus, or 2% based on Copernicus. What we would like to do is make Copernicus data and Earth observation data ubiquitous in a way, i.e. we would like users, a little bit like it is the case with telecoms or with satellite navigation nowadays, not to even know that they're making use of the data. At the moment that is not the case, to be perfectly honest. Global challenges and data sharing, here we come to geo-data sharing principles and the point that I mentioned earlier about many of these applications being global in nature, and then finally the growth in jobs in the downstream sector is something which is clearly at the heart of the Juncker Commission's priorities today. So what are we going to do about it? In short, we're really doing two things. We're strengthening the distribution infrastructure for Copernicus, but the point that I want to particularly make here, because this is where the link with EuroGEOSS comes in, relates to the new infrastructure that we're setting up to allow easier access to Copernicus data. So these are called the DIAS, so the Data Access and Information Services, which will offer access to all Copernicus data and information from single points, and they will be co-located with computing resources so that users don't have to download all the data to their own premises, but can process the data where it is. This in the IT community is not particularly new news in a way, because this is something which cloud computing companies have been doing for quite some time. So what it also allows is for users to bring their own data into this ecosystem in order to combine Earth observation data and information with other sources of data. The idea actually is very simple. The point of this slide is to say that what we will provide is the network, the data, and the processing capability for users to be able to, in situ in a way, process all the data without having to download it. Now this brings me to the data link with EuroGEOSS, which is that, sorry, actually the slides are the other way around. So here I will talk about the Copernicus services. I will speak, when I go back to the previous slide, I will speak to the link between the big data approach of Copernicus and EuroGEOSS on the slide here. So what we will do, or what we see in terms of the interaction with EuroGEOSS, is that the DIAS is intended to be an enabler for the development of EuroGEOSS projects, because basically it provides access to all the data and information, and it allows us to do what EuroGEOSS seeks to do, which is to bring in other data from other sources, be that other satellites or non-Earth observation data, into that same infrastructure. It means that we're mutualizing the cost of data processing, and we would allow EuroGEOSS to really enrich this ecosystem by building on top of the infrastructure that we are making available. So to maybe put it in a slightly unconventional way, what Copernicus will be able to offer is the sort of non-sexy part of data processing, i.e. the network, the data, and the processing power. And the value-added applications and the interaction with the users, which what EuroGEOSS is seeking to do, would be able to build on top of that on a mutualized infrastructure. And what EuroGEOSS can in addition do is attract additional data to the EO ecosystem in Europe, be that in situ data, which has been mentioned several times during the meeting of the high-level group, but also data from member states, also data internationally. So when we're talking about the key synergy in data management between Copernicus and EuroGEOSS, I think the one thing to remember is the back office and the front office. The back office we will provide and mutualize, leaving all the freedom to EuroGEOSS to basically develop applications which are necessary for your community. Now, when I go back to this slide here, on the link between the Copernicus services and EuroGEOSS, the links are actually relatively obvious. So when you're looking at Copernicus services, particularly climate change, emergency, land and marine, and then you look at geo priorities, so SDGs, climate change and disasters, I've also mentioned cities and human settlements as well as ecosystem accounting, the link is very clear. So how do we do this without having the overlap? We had quite an interesting discussion, I thought, this afternoon in the high-level working group, which actually encapsulates this point really very well. We see that EuroGEOSS is an enriching builder on top of, if I might say, of the Copernicus services, which tend to be quite generic. Our colleague from ESA made a very nice parallel between wholesale and retail. Copernicus services, by definition, are there to serve Europe as a whole, but they are not tailored to the needs of individual users. EuroGEOSS can take the output from the Copernicus services and refine those further so as to meet the needs of specific user communities. So what we see EuroGEOSS as being is actually the essential missing link between the space infrastructure and the services of Copernicus and the end users. And that link is actually quite key, because the end users, be they public agencies, be they private companies, be they actually any type of user, they will not know much about space data, because space data is quite specific and quite a specific expertise driven. So EuroGEOSS allows us to fill that link. And by doing that, it obviously brings us to the point on user uptake, because it will help us promote the user uptake of Copernicus service products much better amongst different communities. So these can be Copernicus service products processed to a higher level, or actually combined with any other types of data for your needs. And SDGs for us are actually probably the best example of that, because that is what we feel Copernicus is probably at its weakest at. We're doing quite a bit on climate change and on emergency when we link it to the geo priorities. When we look at SDGs and the cooperation and the coordination for Europe's input into SDGs, it becomes a lot more complicated. And if I was to be quite frank about it, I think that Copernicus probably needs to do more, and EuroGEOSS in a way provides an excellent vehicle for doing that. So the takeaway, I guess, from this slide, to summarize it once again, is that the Copernicus services in a way provide the raw material for EuroGEOSS to build its applications and user-driven approach on top of. So that is the second major complementarity. And then finally, and this will bring me to the end, is that being an applications-oriented initiative, it will help us stimulate user uptake and Earth observation data, helping us prove actually the use of the space assets that we have. It can enhance the use and the uptake of Copernicus service products by tailoring them to user communities and to specific global challenges. It can play a key role for me in the Sustainable Development Goals, simply because that is something where I believe we need to do more, and I'm not sure Copernicus is on its own capable of doing more. And by offering that umbrella, it will actually show in very concrete terms how Copernicus, and actually Earth observation also in Europe on a broader scale, can help the EU meet the international and global challenges. And then finally, by introducing commercial EO applications, we can also create additional demand from the private sector for Copernicus, which so far has been tailored largely to public sector needs. So I would conclude on this and simply say that the main areas of let's say, complementarity relate to, one, the uptake of Copernicus services on which EuroGEOSS can build. Secondly, on data infrastructures, whereby EuroGEOSS will be able to build on the mutualized infrastructure offered by the Copernicus DIAS. For user uptake, whereby EuroGEOSS can promote and stimulate the user uptake of both Copernicus and Earth observation data. International dimension of Copernicus by helping to meet the global challenges which EuroGEOSS and GEO by definition will help to do. And then fifth and last, the integration of additional data into this European ecosystem of Earth observation data, be that data from international missions, from European missions other than Copernicus, or through in situ data, which I understand is one of the areas which is being identified by our member states as being a key part of EuroGEOSS. So on these 5 pillars, I would conclude and say that these are probably the 5 main areas of complementarity. I'm sure there are many more, but it's quite hot, and I think it's time for me to stop. So thank you very much.
So, thank you very much, Andrea. This is, I think, very, very clear, and that shows beautifully the complementarities and synergies between EuroGEOSS and Copernicus. So, as was said by Andrea, Robert-Jan, and myself, users. This is absolutely essential. And now comes the time to present you a few samples, 3 of them, just to illustrate what EuroGEOSS can be looking like. We will have one first example called Protected Areas, and this will be presented by Max Kraglia, lead scientist at the Joint Research Center. Max, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Jack, and ladies and gentlemen, good evening. What we are presenting here is, first of all, let me be clear, this is work that I'm presenting entirely done by others. I'm just a messenger, which doesn't mean that I'm not taking any responsibility, but it's just to acknowledge that this is really very much work done from colleagues within the Commission, within the Joint Research Centre, but also in the Member States in research projects. And it's really the idea of how we can bring some of these things together. So the way in which I think, in fact, Gilles has introduced this, he said, well, what I would like to see, particularly for protected areas, but probably also for the others, is to start seeing at a range of current projects and initiatives that we have, and then see how, within a EuroGEOSS framework, they could start coming together and add additional value. So that basically was the brief that I had. And here, of course, you will see only a small selection, but we have tried to capture some projects that are Europeans with a global reach, projects that are European with a European focus, some that are institutionally focused and driven by the member states, and others that are research. So, of course, if we talk about protected areas, the first starting point in Europe is the Natura 2000 network. This is one of the largest ecosystem connections of protected areas in Europe. It covers 18% of the land area of the European Union, which is about 4 and a bit million square kilometers. So 18% is an awful lot of land, but it also covers 6% of all the marine area. And this is data that is managed by the European Environment Agency. But last year, through the EuroGEOSS project, we also developed a mobile app so that the citizens can become more aware of the protected areas nearby, and they can contribute to understanding and upkeeping these protected areas. Of course, Andreas being here, I couldn't not put something about Copernicus, and this is a clear case where we have, the global land high-resolution hotspot monitoring is one of the initiatives in which basically you go and provide a lot of high-level resolution and gives answers to ad hoc requests, and it's really supported a whole range of different projects in the area of biodiversity conservation. To move on to projects which are more European focused and are driven by the member states, INSPIRE is the infrastructure for spatial information in Europe. This is really an effort of the 28 member states to make more visible and accessible the data that they have from public administrations, from in situ networks. This is mainly where the data comes from. And of course, for protected areas, there's quite a lot of data that is now available. Within INSPIRE as a whole, there's about 20,000 data sets that are fully documented, and you can see that protected areas, you will have a range that are directly relevant to that. We have a more global project, which is the Data Observatory for Protected Areas. This is managed by the Joint Research Centre, and this focuses primarily in Africa and the Asian and Pacific, Caribbean and Pacific countries, but basically there it looks at protected areas and identify the uniqueness and irreplaceability, and so where funding should be directed in order to protect those that are more vulnerable and are more important. But then we also have projects particularly related, for example, of forest fires. We have also seen very recently how devastating effect they may have. And we have both European capabilities in respect to the Forest Fire Information Service, but also how this brings to the global view and the global wildfire information system. And so here you can see how a typical case of European projects that feed into global ones. We have specific projects from the European Space Agency on forestry, like the thematic exploitation platform on that, so really exploiting some of the opportunities from there. And then we have research projects funded by the Horizon 2020 program, and here we have picked two as an example. One is focusing on wetlands, the Wetland Observatory Service, and one is Ecopotential, which again focuses on 25 selected protected areas to really sort of trying to develop the models that enable to take the information and write to indicators. So it tries to develop the entire chain that enables then to answer answer questions that are given. We have other global projects like the Global Human Settlement Layer that uses a lot of remote sensing data, and Copernicus in particular, to look at the evolution and the pressure of human societies on a whole range of issues, including protected areas. So you can see here that we have looked at a whole range of projects that pick different elements between global, European research and others. The question is, how can we build that into a EuroGEOSS context? And again, of course, for the interest of time, I'm just giving you a hint of some of the issues that could be done. So the first one here, for example, we have built an infrastructure where, like in every data cube that you can have, where basically we have taken all the forest fires from the European Forest Fire Information Service over a 16-year period from 2000 to 2016, and you can slice by time, you can slice by geography, and this is a typical data cube model, and you can see and you can appreciate what is the impact of forest fires in different parts of Europe at different times. And this obviously has major impact, and you can see which are the countries which are more particularly affected. You can start looking at the impact of vegetation for every single forest fire in Europe over a 16-year period. You can see when it happened, what was the impact on vegetation, that big drop on the NDVI, and how that area recovers. And you can do that for every single forest fires. You can do that for the burnt areas, and so of course, you can imagine that given a presentation here in the front of so many, I wouldn't dream to do a live demonstration. But if you want to come to the European stand at the end of this talk, tomorrow and the day after, I have the live demo where I can show you how this is all computed on the fly as we go along. But basically, you can see over the 16-year period what has been the cumulative effect of forest fires in burnt area. And of course, then the interesting thing is to start to looking at the impact on protected areas. And so for each area, administrative area in Europe, you can compute, which is like at the level of a province, a small area, you can compute all the protected areas and what has been the cumulative impact of forest fires, how many square kilometers have been burnt year by year and cumulative. And now this is just an example of forest fires, but then you can start adding, for example, the global surface water analysis and start looking, and we have evidence in certain areas, protected areas, the water has been pumped out, and immediately next to them, agriculture is flourishing. So, you know, there are clearly this balancing between different uses of resources. You can look at the impact on the growth of urban areas, etc., etc. So this was clearly just an example, some of the flavor of how you can start bringing all these issues together. We use some of the data from Inspire that comes from administrative areas to do that. Now, you will have noticed that to do this, there's a great opportunity to have a shared framework and start adding value. And now you can, within this framework, you can add a lot of the different projects and the different output and see what additional added value you have. But of course, to do that, you need to also have an infrastructure or more than one. Now, in this case, to do this demonstration, we have used our own in-house big data infrastructure for analyzing Earth observation. In future, we will have the DIAS, which Andreas referred. We will have a European Open Science Cloud. There will be multiple infrastructure. It clearly that from a European point of view, we need to make sure that they all work together because otherwise we'll end up with a lot of more silos, and this is obviously not a good thing. But this is something that we are aware and will be working on. And with that, thank you very much for your attention.
So thank you very much, Max. You have very well documented the existing assets in Europe, but also given some views on the future of what EuroGEOSS could be. As it was indicated previously, this doesn't prejudge in any way what could be the EuroGEOSS application in the future, but it is an example of what kind of structure it could have in general. And with this, I think I would like to move on to the next speaker, and we are going to be in the domain of renewable energy, the use of Earth observation in the domain of renewable energy. And this is Thierry Rangin from École des Mines in France, who has the floor. Please, Thierry.
Thank you very much, Gilles. Hello, everybody. So it's my pleasure to present you some thought about renewable energy in EuroGEOSS. And you have, I don't do the job alone. I have the help of all my colleagues, and you have all the different logos there that are talking about them. I will not cite all of them because it's too long, but at least I want to recognize their help. So here is a very interesting slide coming from IRENA, which is not a European project, of course, but where the EU is contributing. And IRENA is the International Renewable Energy Agency, and so they try to take a look to the Sustainable Development Goals, the one which is called the 7th one, which is talking about an energy. And as you know, energy is central in all human activity. And so they try to see what's happened and what energy contribute to in 3 domains: human development, environmental sustainability, and sustainable growth. And here you have an example of how a specific domain can contribute to all of them. And here, energy is really central and contribute to any of these SDG we are talking about every day in GEO. So I take also look to the work program. You have here a kind of analyze. It's a guess. I certainly forget some things. But here you have at least one participating organization talking about renewable energy, which is EuroREC, European Renewable Energy Center organization, which is talking also about education. EarthS is present also because there are a lot of companies using Earth observation also for renewable energy activities. And you will find also flagship, an initiative for renewable energy, and you have a very nice side even tomorrow about that, and also different activities in other initiatives. I list some of them: AfriGeo, Asian Oceania Geo, the Geo Global Water Sustainability, Blue Planet, and so on, and very specific community activities that are here. And we find some of the Copernicus activities that appear here, but are in the loop since a long time within GEO. So let's talk about success stories and what is actually ongoing within the energy domain. So first example, it's coming from GeoCradle. So there is a pilot for the local authority in Egypt trying to propose some information about real-time solar energy in order to have inclusion of this energy on the grids. And really we are talking about user here, because we have the grid operators, the national ministry, which are looking to the decision making in order to include all this energy inside the grid system. And also, of course, the investors that are looking for CSP and PV. That's one of the example of solar energy. There are much more on that. Even we can talk later on that, but there are plenty of them. And they are looking to forecasting solar energy for the storage, so to production and so on. So that's really user needs, which is driving the development of this pilot. GeoEssential is also a focus on the water, food, energy nexus. So linking agriculture, water, and energy, which is one of the key elements. There was some presentation this afternoon that were also linked with this. And we have our colleague of GeoEssential working to develop a set of standard model, looking to the potential of EO for all this water, food, energy nexus, which is really one of the questions for decision makers, for the citizen, and also for the researcher. The Copernicus Atmosphere Monitoring Services is one of these Copernicus services that put renewable energy on that. We were, as MinParisTech, participating on this activity, and the key element to have solar energy on this Copernicus Atmospheric Monitoring Service was the users. The only point was 40,000 users of this activity. Actually, it's operational since the very beginning of this year, and we are monitoring all the users every quarter, and it's a growing number of users, mainly commercial users, and the satisfaction on this is very high, and we have these improving curves of using Copernicus services, and even behind that there is a wish to develop downstream service by the European Commission and developing some new application building on these core services. NextGeos is also essential in the framework. NextGeos is one of the major contribution of the Commission to GEOS. it's not talking only about organization of the GCI. It's really focusing on cloud computing, on performance of the system, and on service that can be developed on the cloud, which is actually not on the GCI. So that's something which need to be developed, and we have a set of pilots on that. And here you have two examples. It's market-oriented, so this means that we have, for each of them, a client behind that. I'm talking about client. You can imagine where we are. So, and its user, let's say, EDF, which is the grid producer of the electricity producer of France, and a small startup called Inside We Trust, which is developing a mapping of solar energy in town. On the first one, we want to explore the fact that actually, when you are using CAMS, you have only one point, and we have users that say we want a grid at a country level. So this means that we have to develop cloud computing system to answer to the question with key performance indicators. Actually, we want to reach something which is acceptable for a full country. Actually, when you have 1 point, you have 15 seconds to wait. The second one is to have also something that allow to have on the fly, in place of an archive, data sets which is produced and delivered to the users. And also there are some key performance indicators. Other example, the Wind Atlas. Actually, there is a development of a new European Wind Atlas. I extract from this only the part related to ocean, because it's also interesting to connect that with the marine renewable energy and the windmills and the floating windmill that are developed. These are two projects funded by the Commission. One is achieved, the North Wind, that develop the link with in-situ measurement coming from LIDAR and the link with all the satellite data in order to have efficient and precise data sets for the North Sea. And the new European Wind Atlas is actually producing these new elements and trying to develop it with very precise activities behind that and calibration and so on. So in situ is behind. So let's start to talk about future. When we are talking about climate, we are talking about future. So this is an example of one of the sectorial information services developed in renewable energy or in energy within the P3S services. So that's coming from a project called ESEM, European Climatic Energy Mixes. The user behind that is the grid operator, and they want to know, and that's a question we have from them because we have many meeting with them trying to understand the need, translate their need in terms of product, and they want to know what the development of the grid will be. And one type of question we have from Norwegian people, for example, is, okay, we have some dams, they are close to the end, what should we do now? That's the type of question. A decision for the future, a very high decision for the 20, 30, 40, 50 years that are coming. Should we rebuild some dams? Should we go to wind offshore? What should we do? And that we try to answer using all the climate projection and translated it also in energy variables. And it's also the link with seasonal forecast, which is also of interest. And you have a full demonstrator, which is available online, and you can test it. You just search for ESEM, and you will have it. Second one, which is also in the climate change services, which is talking about energy, it's Clean for Energy. And that's also another approach. And here we have somebody who work on that, talking about development, co-development, co-design approach with end users that needs climate data for their business. So it's seasonal forecast, it's long-term forecast also. A banker wants to know, of course, what will be the future of production of the wind system in 20 years, because he's going to put money on the table for developing it, and he wants to be sure that he will have the feedback on that. So just a small focus about user needs, how we capture these user needs, which is key for what we want to do in EuroGEOSS. So that's literature review, of course. That's the link with representative bodies, survey, individual discussion, individual interview, co-development, training even. We are doing a training every year for solar energy, and we have 30 to 40 people coming from the industry and wanting to understand how to use Copernicus data. What we can do with that, and are they valuable? Can we make business on that? And mainly the answer is yes, and they are sources for us to the element we can develop and what we want to develop on the future. User meeting also are key, and something which is sometime forgotten, the help desk. Somebody that can answer to all your questions, and that's really important. So I try to make a categorization of the different user, policymakers and their needs, grid operators, industrial, bankers, researchers, and citizens. You have a set of examples of their needs, and I try to summarize because it's really specific for any of for all of the renewable energy. So let's talk about future. What is needed if we want to develop interesting pilots linked with the users, with different applications, and trying to make them new things that improve the benefit of using Earth observation data. So I tried to imagine what are the key framework components we need. So you have, of course, Earth observation data, the user needs, which are key, the use of the geo-common infrastructure, like it is, and as it will be in the future. The data management principle, the in-situ and citizen observatory, the uptake activity. Are we able to promote this and to develop new activity? The training, of course, because it's key from the initial training to the executive training. Dissemination, of course, and this help desk, which is of interest for me because of our experience on that. So I tried to imagine, let's say, 3 applications and to try to give some input on these different elements, on their benefit and what they can, where is the need for the development in each of these applications. So the first one is the water, food, energy nexus. So it's needed GEOSS, Copernicus, and other type of data, of course. It's for decision makers, citizens, and researchers. So the actual geo infrastructure is okay. It fulfills the need, actually. So maybe the need will change, but actually it's okay. It's the data management principles are very relevant and highly needed because it's also linked with citizen observatories. So there is a need also for these cheap sensor and citizen observatories. And so that was also the wish of the Commission to develop these in-situ measurements and in-situ sensors. And actually, it's not clear what we can develop on tech activity. On training, it needs to be developed. And the dissemination start. GeoEssentially is one of these examples. And I think there is a need also to construct an help desk on that to help the people to understand the different elements and to build on that. Another one, energy in smart city. Why this one? Because when we look to the future of energy, it's going to something which is quite different to what we know. It's the ability to produce your own energy, to consume it, and also to sell it to other or to share it with the other. And we are going from a centralized activity in Europe to something which is decentralized and even with some, let's say, smart grids, small and smart grid, local grids. So when we look to this, it's also how we can produce energy on the cities. So looking to this, so that was one of the example on the EuroGEOSS, where we are trying to look what can be done with solar energy in cities. It's need, of course, GEOSS, Copernicus, and all the other type of data. We are serving all the stakeholders that I list before, from the decision maker to the citizen, for the industrial, for all the people, the bankers, and everybody inside that group of users that I try to check. There is a need for high-performance infrastructure. So GEOSS is welcome, that's very nice, but also we need to develop service, a software as a service, and the pilot in EuroGEOSS are perfect for this. It's very relevant and highly need to have this data management principle application and the share of data. The Institute and Citizen Observatory needs to be developed, and IoT, the Internet of Things, can be part of this, of course. The uptake activities are undergoing, and the first commercial activities are here, even if they are supported or not by the Commission. Actually, there are startups that try to develop activity on that, and so it's our duty also to help them to go on. The training needs to be developed, of course. The dissemination start, and we have to construct something that helps the people to understand and to answer to any of their questions to be able to go on. Last example, climate and energy. So, as you know, SDG is one of the key focus in Geo, but climate change also with the Paris Agreement. So we need also to see what's happened with climate and energy, and the Commission already through Copernicus tried to build some response to this. But I think that there will be a future for developing some integration on that. So same answer. GEOSS, Copernicus, and EuroGEOSS service for all stakeholders. There is here, again, a need for high-performance infrastructure. There are first attempts in integration of Institute and Citizen Observatory. Uptake activity needs to be developed, and that's actually the case. It's starting to go on. And actually, there is training, user meeting, webinars that are developed in order to show first example and add the feedback from the user. And so all the things that needs to go on, dissemination and help desk, needs to be improved. Now, to conclude, just to give you a flavor of what we can do on renewable energy. If you want to know more, tomorrow morning, 8:30 on Continental B. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Thierry. I think I would like also to thank you for your big effort to try to move into the user area and to characterize what should be needed very concretely. So we are going to move. I will get some time after the presentation for some questions. But I think we should move on to the next sample pilot, which is in the domain of agriculture. So again, in the context of EuroGEOSS, how can we use better Earth observation for a more sustainable agriculture? And this sample pilot on agriculture is going to be presented by Pierre de Fourny, and Pierre is a professor and colleague of GCAM, and is at the University of Louvain in Belgium.
Thank you, Gilles. And it's getting warmer and warmer here. I hope I will succeed to capture your attention for 20 minutes or more. I have the pleasure to review with you some of the projects which are related to agriculture in Europe using remote sensing. Of course, I mean, this will be a mixture of these projects, and there are many more around for sure. My talk will be, as my predecessor, with the present and the future, but I will start with the past, because, as you know, remote sensing has been used in agriculture since the early days, and then I will proceed with the most recent development thanks to the Copernicus program, and then we will look forward for a way to put an agriculture pilot for EuroGEOSS. Okay, let's remember that in 1988, the Mars team from the GRC was already providing information in a timely manner for crop production from remote sensing. And since then, they have been improving the system, and this is a very world-class system, which is in hands now. And we celebrate last week the 25th anniversary of the Mars Bulletin, providing near real-time crop monitoring and yield forecasting for all the country members, as well as others. Along to that, the food security assessment they complete for ad hoc situation is also of great value for the DG as well as for international bodies. Along to this kind of effort, GeoGLAM has been launched 6 years ago with the support of the G20, and today this is a flagship for GEO. GeoGLAM is really putting together a system of systems for agriculture monitoring. And the key part is the crop monitor, which is running now since few years, putting together the different information coming from the Chinese, the Russian, the American, and the European, coming from the Mars project, for instance, and delivering actually key information to the EMIS, I mean, for the price prospective analysis. The second output of GeoGlam is the crop early warning. This is for food insecure countries, and this goes along the same line than the Mars activities. The third one is a GCAM network, which is a globally distributed network of sites where voluntary teams are putting together in situ data to benchmark remote sensing activities. This kind of activities has been supported by projects like Sigma. Sigma has been instrumental for GCAM to organize cross-site experiment. It has been also a key activities to develop infrastructure and a data model for in situ variables. And also Sigma has been very, very important for capacity building in the context of the GeoGlam, in particular for yield forecasting. Along to that, Copernicus is delivering the information useful for agriculture monitoring at 300 meter to 1 kilometer resolution, meaning that 1 pixel is 300 meter wide. This has been used for decades now, and this is coming through the Copernicus service Global LAN. But next to that, the GeoGlam also put together some Earth observation requirement to submit to the CEOS, the Committee of the Space Agency, for crop monitoring in the future. And this has been put together, and actually very recently, thanks to the Copernicus satellite space component, many of these requirements has been fulfilled by the Sentinel-1, Sentinel-2, and Sentinel-3. This makes a big difference in the game of agriculture monitoring. As you know, Sentinel-2A has been launched, Sentinel-2B is up there operational since June, and therefore, since June, we got every 5 days a 10-meter resolution imagery for any place in the world. And every 5 days, you repeat this cycle, which make completely different the game for the agriculture monitoring. Because this is every 5 days, this is 10 meter, and this is global. Today, this is about 35 petabytes of data which has been downloaded by about 100,000 of registered people. Therefore, this data flow is flowing for sure. And this changed completely the user demand. The user demand is much aware about this kind of move and also much aware about the information technology revolution. With a mobile phone on the field, with a farm of servers, with a UAV flying over the fields, this changed completely the game. And the user demand now is for big data access in real time. It's also for high resolution, field level in product in real time. They expect also a multi-source integration in a seamless manner, as well as tailor Earth observation-derived product for agriculture advice. And therefore, this kind of things need to proceed through a different way. This is why currently in Europe there is 3 different platforms developed under different projects. The first one is through the EuroGEOSS project. There is an agriculture pilot with the crop monitoring services looking very much at the data analytics of the existing variables through the cloud processing, of course, on demand or systematically. From ESA perspective, there is a food security thematic exploitation platform where there is also, in addition, an emphasis on the mobile visualization to be able to look at the data on the field. And then the Antares project is putting the challenge even further, looking at the Internet of Things and the integration of crowdsourcing information. These 3 different platforms also require development of the exploitation of the satellite. And this is where we stand with for the RISE. Sentinel-1 make a big difference looking at the RISE dynamics. It doesn't work. Or it should be running. Maybe you have seen that already many times. I mean, you see the different stages of the development of the rice along the season, and this kind of approach allows to assess the loss of rice area due to the El Nino flooding in 2016. For the other crop, a system has been developed under the project of Sentinel-2 for agriculture, which is an open source system demonstrated already at full scale in real time, and running locally or on the cloud. And this system is a bit like your washing machine. While you take your laundry and you get it clean, the system here takes the imagery from Landsat and Sentinel-2 and you get your product out. And this is why over Mali, for instance, in 2016, suddenly you got on a monthly basis a cloud-free image at 10-meter resolution looking at all the fields in Mali every month. This was unexpected a few years ago. And this allows you to look at the cropland, the actually cultivated area, which is an early information for official statistics. Similarly, in other countries, as it has been demonstrated in 9 different places in the world and in 3 countries, in Ukraine, you can look at the cropland, but also at the crop type, providing actually information of the monitoring of a wheat, for instance, very specifically. This kind of information show that how much we are at the top class for the Earth observation data source, thanks to the Copernicus in Europe. We have also a pioneer operational crop monitoring system, thanks to the Mars expertise. The world-class Earth observation research laboratory and rich in situ data in Europe make a big difference. And we have a competitive Earth observation know-how in the private company. But this is not enough, because today we work on a fragmented project-based effort which prevent Earth observation innovation from having a long-term impact on the Earth observation agriculture services. It prevents also from reaching a critical mass to create a significant market, because it comes as a fragmented output of different projects in different time frame and so on. It prevents also ensuring a cumulative progress from one outcome to another, because it runs by different donors. Actually, it's difficult to sustain because the donors has different mandates and therefore they don't go to the end. They don't go to the uptake by the end user necessarily. And it's difficult to be adopted by international initiative because we are project-based. And therefore, the potential of EuroGEOSS is really to make an impact, to sustain this kind of expertise and services in the framework of the GEO. And this is why probably EuroGEO is expected to better serve the user needs and to upscale existing or under development application. For DG Agri, for instance, for the member state for sure, for the agriculture sector, including the agribusiness, the insurance and so on, for the food insecure countries or emerging agriculture sector, and as well for international partners like GeoGLAM, GCAM, World Food Programme and so on. But to do so, EuroGEOSS will have to coordinate, to combine, and to cooperate. Coordinate, probably, to proceed to the inventory of the ongoing activities, to manage the redundancy, to exchange between projects, between donors, to build a European consistent ecosystem for agriculture services. To combine, because we want to cumulate the R&D findings from one project to another. We want to scale up the success story to the uptake by the end user in the midterm, not in the time frame of a given project. We want also to identify the R&D gaps. And we need to cooperate to have an impact on the international level, for instance, for GeoGLAM, to make sure that European comes as a whole for the sake of the visibility and consistency. Now I am going to go through a set of potential elements for a EuroGEOSS agriculture pilot. For instance, in the Common Agriculture Policy reform, there is a huge need to integrate the in situ data with the data coming from the Copernicus space segment. And therefore, there is a big support from GRC to develop, in the past, the CAP implementation, but in the future, to support the use of this data integration. Along to this, the Send4 CAP, supported by EU and ESA, has been an example of close collaboration between the DGs, between the member state and ESA, to try to tackle this key question: how can we make use of Sentinel data for the Common Agriculture Policy today and tomorrow after the reform. Similarly, another potential element for the EuroGEOSS agriculture pilot could be to support GCAM. For instance, it could support the GCAM European component, where there is already 5 different sites in Germany, in France, in Spain, in Belgium, in Poland. And this would make a difference. Instead of coming together, separately, we could have a framework to develop new methodology for advanced services in agriculture monitoring. Similarly, Sigma and Sentinel-2 Agri are both almost complete or complete, and actually there is no compendium of best practice. After 5 years of project, we need to gather together all this information and to make it available to GEOS and to the GCAM GeoGLAM framework. The GCAM European component could develop that kind of element. This has been developed on the Belgium GCAM site in the framework of a specific project, where now there is a nitrogen nutrition index to tell to the farmer how to optimize the fertilization and to reduce, the fertilization and optimize the yield while reducing the environmental impact on the water. And therefore, this kind of product needs to be developed together at European scale to be later on taken on by the private sector. Similarly, Sentinel-2 Agri was proved to be useful for many countries, but the project is ending, and therefore there will not be any uptake and any specific, there are an uptake, but the people, the users are left on their own, and there is no mechanism to finance the support of this uptake for a midterm, or at least to make sure that there is an effective uptake on the long term. The Earth observation for sustainable development is a different kind of target, trying to mainstreaming the Earth observation into a specific customer who are the development bank activities. And therefore, this is a very specific customer, and there is a long list of applications which has been identified and ongoing. From the geodata for agriculture and water project developed by Netherlands, there is a set of lessons learned when we look for service development in Earth observation for agriculture. And obviously, it must be a user demand driven, but it's not enough. You need a business model and a revenue model to make sure that you will sustain in the long term. But also you need to look for aggregator to reach the scale to be able to serve the data. And also you have to ensure that you get the support from the governmental offices to make sure that you have an effective implementation on the field. This project has been able to develop key activities like insurance of credit provision for more than 1 million farmers in Ethiopia based on remote sensing. Similarly, agro-advice for 400,000 farmers has been in place in Vietnam for the rice or for other activities. This should serve as an example for developing the whole chain from the data, the methodological development, the validation, the taking up, and the services. There is a forthcoming activity which could be also a key element for the EuroGEOSS agriculture pilot and support to GeoGLAM as it was planned, is to develop agriculture support for in Africa and for food insecure countries. And this is just starting, and there is a lot of ambition in this project. But to conclude, we see EuroGEOSS as a triple opportunity for the European Earth observation community in agriculture monitoring. First, to speed up and to scale up the most promising Earth observation application to the agriculture sector, including the very complex European cropping system. We have probably one of the most challenging landscape in agriculture, and we need to develop an expertise to tackle this. For that, we could develop a financing mechanism to leverage the outcome of project till the effective uptake by the user. There is a missing link there, because in the framework of a project of 3 years, 4 years, you don't get the user to use your system forever. We need also to consolidate the European know-how and innovation capacity to develop this Earth observation research and private sector ecosystem. And this could be supported by the exchange through maybe a meeting on an biannual basis. Make sure that everybody is aware of what's going on where and what is the maturity of the different services. And last but not least, to provide a sustainable and coherent contribution to international activities like to GEO, and in particular to GeoGLAM and GCAM. Thank you for your attention.
Yeah, thank you very much for this extensive presentation about the different activities existing in Europe. I think the group which is trying to build the EuroGEOSS is looking for exactly this kind of assessment and to build on what is existing. I would like to say that, it was not possible for the presentation of the 3 sample pilots to identify all the existing sources and resources. For instance, the research infrastructure program in Europe is a great source of in situ data, which was not really mentioned in those presentations. So I think we are very grateful to you for your patience, but if you, I think I said I would give the floor to for some questions to people in the audience, but my humble opinion is that we shouldn't discuss really the topics themselves, but more the generic issues that are beyond the different presentation. So if there are questions on about the way EuroGEOSS should be developed in the future, and that you want to ask to the speakers, I would welcome those questions. So I see one, Christophe, please. Yeah. If you can take a mic and introduce yourself, because as the session is web streamed, it's better that if you give your name.
Yeah, thanks, Jill. Christoph Häuser, Leibniz Institute for Evolution and Biodiversity Science, also the Natural History Museum in Berlin, Germany. I would like to pick up from Max Squaglia's presentation on a site-based approach. So if EuroGEOSS is a mechanism, or is meant to be a prime mechanism to achieve better workflow integration from data to real on-ground applications, I think that's very valuable to pick on that as an example. So I have a comment on that and a question, but Max has just left, so maybe somebody else. He's back.
Max,
yeah. So the comment is, again, and protected areas are a key mechanism across disciplines, and both to reach out to Earth observation and in situ communities. It's not just, as Max had time to showcase, biodiversity, ecosystems, disasters is equally valuable for agriculture, water, even health, tourism, other things, or other domains. So the comment is, again, a site-based approach would be key. It doesn't have to be protected areas, but I think it's a good way to reach on-ground actual stakeholders for real life application of what Copernicus data can help them to achieve. And I think that's what we are missing in large parts of Europe. It's also scalable to global level easily if we pick on protected areas. My comments or my question is, and again, that picks up from what Jill just said, what is meant by protected areas? If it's strictly protected areas, I would like to contradict and say it should be more environmentally critical areas, meaning many of the long-term, especially in situ monitoring system we have in Europe, be it Torino, be it Ilter, also some of the marine are outside actual protected areas. And again, we should capitalize on them. So that's my question or critical comment to Max.
I think that you're making a very valid point. I think that what we were trying to show here is the typical case for EuroGEOSS, where you have a whole number of different initiatives and projects with different lifespan, different actors, different outcomes, and you need to start developing a framework which is both at the policy and coordinating level, and at the infrastructural level as well, to start bringing all these things together to add even additional value on top of that. And all the comments that you're making are perfectly valid. So we were just trying to make that as one of the example for the protected areas or sensitive areas, as well as other applications as energy environment. So I think that it was just, that was the framework. And once you have that, and of course being site-specific and time, being able to see change over time is enormously important. That is the big change that is taking place in Geo now, that ability to look at what is changing and where are things going. And therefore, once we start building those capabilities, then of course it will be a benefit for both Europe and globally. So that's all.
Okay, and we still have time for other questions if there are some around. So I think, yeah.
Ruud Grim from the Netherlands Space Office. Maybe a suggestion for the European Commission for the next projects that call for Horizon 2020. Maybe it's an idea to have more focus on, let's say, the organizational and financial sustainability of the services that are being developed. So what is the future perspective of the services that are being developed in the research projects?
Well, actually, the question of sustainability was raised by Pierre, for instance, but also probably by Thierry Rangin. There is no simple response to that, as you know. But the idea of, the idea of the Geo high-level working group of the Geo caucus to try to go for a joint approach in Europe for a European component of GEOS was definitively a lot about the sustainability of the services and of the solutions that would be developed through projects, because in a sense what is proposed to do here is to put around the table the countries, but also agencies such as ESA, EUMETSAT, ECMWF, the European Commission with DG GROW, DG RTD, and with the idea that with the whole family around the table, when something becomes operational, then we are going to find solutions through the Copernicus program, through the commercial sector, because one of the solutions to sustain services and products, and I think as civil servants sometimes we forget about that, is that commercial sustainability, so selling products and services, is a way to sustain the services. So it means if there are good ideas out of EuroGEOS, the commercial sector can help to sustain those services. So there are several possibilities for the sustainability. There is another one, which is, of course, through the European Space Agency. But this is only possible with the backing of the member state and the backing of the organization, with the whole family, as I said, around the table. And so I think it's a valid question, but with not a simple answer. And I see with that Miko has a question.
My comment, in a way.
Can you?
As I'm from the Copernicus committee, the Finnish delegate, I think this in Copernicus, this has been already, I think the wholesale retail, if we now take the lingua we have found here, that the wholesale we can find and try to find European solutions that sustain them. But for the retail, we definitely have to find it from a commercial point of view. So I think there is, I think, a good prerequisite for this. But I think also in Copernicus is that we always understood that we try to help for this development to reach a let's say, a level of the maturity for services that they actually can find these commercial, let's say, customers. But there we definitely should, that's, I think, for EuroGEOS a good place where we have to especially see where public services and private sector kind of, or business sectors, they have different solutions. And that's why we need the member states and the kind of European level actions to somewhere meet better. And I hope, and I'm not just hoping, I trust in EuroGEOS to be able to work there. Thank you.
Thank you, Miko. Then I would like to hand the microphone to either Thierry Rangin or Pierre de Fourny, because you have been touching upon this story of sustainability. Maybe Thierry, if you can stand.
Yeah. Okay. So as you know, I present some example talking about renewable energy, but I didn't present also the business activity that are existing behind that. In 2000, there was a project called SODA. Let's start. It was funded by the European Commission for 3 years. It was ICT project, and the business was really the idea was to develop the potential of web at that time for serving the community. So this project was funded by the European Commission on FP5, I think. And then we continue on working as a research center on that. And at the end of the day, we had a question from ESA saying, is there a business behind that? So that we just close the access and say, okay, now if you need to have the access, you have to ask it. And suddenly we have a set of commercial of people saying, hey, how much it is? We have to invent the price for the data and the price for the service. So that's what they did. And in 2006, and then it's developed. And in 2009, we decided to give that to a company in order to make real business on that, because we are a research center. It's not our business to do so. So we did it, and actually, it's a society which is operating the system. There are 5 persons working full time on that and making business on that every day, and being able to have a help desk on that, and being really in connection to the users without any help of European Commission or any other activity behind that, that it's only business. So there is a potential to start from a business, first research project, and to transform it on the long run. But it is not very fast. It takes time and effort also. We even with my colleague have a discussion with business angel at one time and we are researchers, so it's something that we have to discover. And finally, at the end of the day, that's possible. The only answer is not the European Commission have to deal with the sustainability of the service. It's also, there is a full set of position, of possibility, and we have to build on that.
Thank you, Thierry. Then Pierre, please, on this sustainability issue, because you pointed out the fragmentation and the short-term dimension of the projects.
This is a point. I mean, most of the projects are support to develop methods and demonstration. And in the best case, you are able to demonstrate at full scale. And for 1 year, for instance, typically in agriculture, it works year by year. And you demonstrate, and then this is over. And this does not create automatically the market for the next, for the business case. There is a missing link between the development and the demonstration and the uptake by the commercial sector, because the market is not aware, it's not developed yet. And therefore, we believe that there should be a mechanism to allow to sustain a bit further the successful application before they are taken up by the commercial sector. Because in agriculture, you don't prove in 1 year. I mean, you have to do it several years, then you convince. And you know this kind of sector is very conservative. And on the other side, you are dealing also partly with not only industry, but also with administration, public affairs, governmental agency and so on. And they are very conservative before they move to a new system. Therefore, the market doesn't build on its own.
Thank you, Pierre. Something I forgot to say, that because there was a reference made to the 2018 call. The thing is that we are using the instruments which are existing, so both the Copernicus program and Horizon 2020. And I'm sure that if we wouldn't have made a provision for a project under Horizon 2020, then probably the EuroGEOSS would have been qualified as an empty shell. So that's the reason why we thought that we have to start somewhere. I want to point out that the project is not going to be a research and innovation action, but an innovation action, which means that something which should deliver already close to the application. It doesn't guarantee sustainability, but then it guarantees some planning during the project for longer-term use of the application. I'm pleased to take other. Yeah. Can you introduce yourself?
Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. Stand and introduce yourself.
Mark Zebisch from EuroGEOSS, but then I have a question, and then I really don't understand what's the difference between such...
Can you introduce you?
Okay, so Mark Zebisch from EuroGEOSS in Italy. So we are a remote sensing center and research center, but we also worked a lot in Copernicus downstream projects in Horizon 2020 and FP7. And my question is then, what's really the difference to these type of services which in the past have been called downstream services? Because that sounds to me very similar still. So there's the core service, and then I saw many presentations from Copernicus where it was said, okay, the real user demand-oriented projects are the downstream services. They are commercial, or they have been in FP7, for example, as projects which we're asking for the development of downstream services. Is this then now replaced by EuroGEOSS, or what is the relation to that one?
Okay, I think it's a very valid question. But I can give you a reply on my own. But regarding EuroGEOSS, the Commission is only one of the partners in the group. So maybe if somebody from the Miko, maybe if you want to reply, because
again, but I think this is
They can't really hear
Okay,
you
yeah, sorry.
from the website.
I think it's a totally kind of correct, I think, let's say, understanding that in a way it's like the downstream of Copernicus. And there's nothing wrong about that being kind of federated also in a sense of how to get it together. Because I think Copernicus in itself is really thinking until the wholesale ends and disseminate. It has definitely not having planned that maybe we should also try to have mechanisms that put these actors on national levels, on private levels, public levels, that they somehow can also find each other better and deliver more as a full action. And that's why I think there is this very useful collaboration opportunity for the Copernicus and the EuroGEOSS actions, because there is this need from a Copernicus point of view, but I think we expand this even further, because we do have on national levels a lot of activities which was not somehow connected to Copernicus, and that is the fresh new AO data that we also want to have in EuroGEOSS. So there is just a kind of expansion in many directions of the downstream.
Okay, thank you. I'm not going to elaborate on this question, because I think part of the responses have been given by Andreas Wiesbach on the complementarity between EuroGEOSS and Copernicus. Now, I don't know who is next on the list. I guess the gentleman here.
Yeah. My name is Steffen Fritz. I'm from EASA. I have a little bit along those lines still one question which I think is burning, and this is related to that we're in this EuroGEOSS funded in the call supposed to bring existing projects together, kind of organizing Europe as such by leveraging on very important existing projects. Doing just this needs money. That's my point. I think it is not so easy to just say, okay, this exists. It needs some really important coordination. So maybe some of this coordination is done on the EU level, and maybe it's not then in the end the task of that project. But if this is really the case, this goes to some degree against what is innovation. So the reviewers will assess the project against its innovation potential. So I'm just, to put it simple, you need to decide to some degree where the money goes, more in the organizational part or more in the innovation part, and there needs to be to some degree a decision based on that. I'm just opening some question which some people might also have.
As I said, the instrument which is used for this call is an innovation action. So there is no discussion about it. It's not a coordination action, it's an innovation action. But okay, this funding element is one out of many, because as I said, we are all around the table. So it means that they are the countries, they are the organization. I see Jean-Noël Thépaut, there is ECMWF, for instance, there are many organizations. I think we have to look at it in a very collective approach.
Thank you. Lefteris Mamais, Director of Evenflow and also Technical Manager of GeoCradle. Just a comment on sustainability and a question as well. On sustainability, I think exactly because it's an innovation action and it kind of sets the tone, the importance is in basically having a concrete business planning around the applications that will be brought forward, and a business planning that takes into account the users. And here is the question and suggestion at the same time. I haven't seen as such a provision for the involvement of user communities, even though in projects, for example, like Send4Cap that was mentioned earlier, there is this type of organized involvement, meaning that you have, for example, the paying agencies, and you have a group of paying agencies, and these are then the interlocutor for those application sectors where Europe can really bring a concrete contribution to specific, let's say, geo initiatives, but also to a specific sector with a sustainability perspective and so on. I would really like to see if there are views on that, if there is a, let's say, vision behind that, also in relation to the fact that here we're looking at marrying Copernicus, which does have the user forum and a user community, let's say, ecosystem building and so on, and this EuroGEOSS opportunity.
Well, again, I have some ideas about it, but I think it was indicated today several times that the involvement of the commercial sector is one of the elements. I think in the criteria for the coordination group of EuroGEOSS, one of the criteria is about the possible involvement of the commercial sector in those applications. So I think, I don't see any contradiction with the context of the initiative right now. Is there any other question? Because I would welcome it very much. Otherwise, I think, so this was the official launch of the initiative today. I think it was important to have, to mark the day, in a sense, to have this milestone. I think the group which is developing EuroGEOSS in Europe, so the European, the high-level working group, is perfectly aware of the challenge. But having said that, we are going to carry on, and in particular, I think this group is going to, the next task is going to try to identify better what are the best priorities for Europe, and where the best application for citizens, government, researchers, and also are going to be defined. Now, with this, I would like to thank everybody for your contribution and participation, because it was a small room. It was sometimes painful. I see people standing for a while already. And I would like then to thank you very much for your help and for this, creating this EuroGEOSS community. And also, I would like to thank the speakers that have done a great deal of job to try to show what is the sample of activities which are already existing and which we can build. And also, I would like to thank them for looking into the future, in a sense, as well, and providing some elements. They are certainly going to be very useful for the coordination group to put in place or to define better the EuroGEOSS practical implementation. And with this, I wish you have a good evening. Thank you very much.